This is a long time coming. It's exciting. When I was young-ish, I wondered what am I supposed to be grasping? What did a landscape in Italy mean? What did ruins mean? What did Pompeii mean, except for the direct impact, which was profound? Going to profound sites, going to New York City and seeing just an island, Manhattan, of spires. It seemed like one big college dormitory to me with all of these little separate rooms in them. What is it? How does this resonate in our young selves if we come out and we say, what is going on? What are we perceiving? Can we perceive meaning? Can we apply a model, as flawed as it is? Could we apply a model? And so this discussion is about a modality, something you can apply and get rid of, but it is kind of important, or at least instrumental in the way we understand spaces and their meaning, that resonate in a collective subconscious. So this is the ideas of Carl Jung applied to space. It's not such in vogue right now because I don't know, it's seen as essentialist. To me, these were speculative thinkers: Freud, Jung, Adler, Erik Erikson, that helped a lot of people in finding models in which not to subscribe to dogmatically, but to find your bearing. If you enter into space, if you encounter a tower in a graveyard, what does this mean? What are the resonances? If you hear a train in the distance, if you come across an open prairie or an open sea, why is there some bottom chord struck in you? The tide went out here very low, and all of these people are plunking away at the sand, perhaps looking for mussels and crabs, mussels and clams and all of that. That resonates for tens of thousands of years, maybe even 200,000 years, as we were hugging the coastlines, which was in that time 400 feet lower than it is today. It's supposed to even go higher in the next 50 years. So what are these resonances? What are these? How can we say that these things have bearings in our lives? We could know them without knowing hold on, moving down here. We can know them without knowing. Let me float this on top. View, float on top. There we go. Especially as we go to a new space, a space called spatial, the metaverse for culture, metaverse for exhibitions, for experiences, for events. This is there's a mythic resonance to the NFT world, this idea of other worlds, which certainly religions have done a lot with. So these are nothing new, but if we could have the scholarship, a little of the scholarship behind it, we could entertain its articulation. Our final will go on in this space, spatial I/O, a collaborative space, a theatrical space, a dramatic space. And I want to use this space because it's out there. in the strange world, the subconscious world, the interlinked subconscious world of all of these different people out there expressing themselves, having no bearing on the atomic or the analog life, but they're out there and they're making a big impact. So this is where we're all going. And then when we enter into these galleries, we can enter into, every semester for the past 2 years, I've been doing our final in spatial. And this year, people are leaving their portals. So they're linked, threaded, conjoined through portals, which I find very, very interesting. And there's almost no better way or modality to explain this other than the Jungian impact on space. So we'll get around to that. I also want you to be aware of some of the influence of space as having a language to it, a resonant language, and whether you maintain it or discard it or use it or keep it or whatever, the Jungian method is fun, basically, fun and rich. So here are all these galleries in Spatial I/O Spatial Park with Gallery Isoblock, Trashland, and Polycount. Let's go there. You had me at trash. Isoblock. What's your name? Type your name. Oh God. Alright, I'll log into my account. I hope it's... let's do it with Google. That one. Here I am. And Justin we had determined that from Turbo CAD, you can add different sorts of spaces in this. So I want to start categorizing space. So this lecture will get back to what you call it, SketchUp, Trashland, huh? And people are building these portals everywhere. I kind of like the romanticized industrial look here. What's in the portal? Soul Block. I love Seoul. I used to live there. Travel to Soul Block. Something similar. Is this to express graffiti? NFT? That I think is me. Can't go. And you can orient this walking along. There's a physics involved too. Yes, come on, hon. Bonk. Let's back up. I personally don't have the patience for these boundaries in this. Hi. There we are. Let's back up. Let's look around this room. Is a Brooklyn-based nomadic photographer whose eye lens focused primarily on architecture and urban environments. Interesting. So let's get closer. Let's look at this. So this is Trashland, made by some Brooklyn-based guy. And we can see the art hanging. So the couple of adjectives I would use to describe decrepit sort of ruins of factories are former glory, former power, the way of all flesh, nothing ever lasts, the idea of productivity, the idea of employment, the idea of factories supporting whole towns, I have a fairly romantic response to all of these Rust Belt cities and endeavors. I currently live in one, Bridgeport, Connecticut, over there, just the Remington factories. But here they created a stage. Let's see some of the photographs here. Let's go up to them, and interesting. Presumably these are all his photographs. Ooh, there's a train. Subway. I've built, and I was co-director of New York Center of Media Arts. That was in a famous graffiti building in Queens, which is now became hot property. Garden, right at kitty corner from PS1 over there. Wherever we find these environments, we see an attempt to revitalize them, kind of just rediscover the chi flow of all of these. Our industrialism of the West in general, certainly in America, had gone first to Japan and then a little bit Korea briefly, then into China, where it was taken over on a mass scale. And this is a romantic response. I was even in the 721 district of Beijing, where they took over an entire East German designed and built factory space for blocks and turned this into a fine art area. So this is nothing new. What's the response? How are we supposed to, except for the immediate, I keep contrasting this, the immediate, here's a photograph, he likes abandoned places, I guess. Big fan, and all of the photo works in this space. Let's walk around. Presumably about 30 to 40 people can join me in these spaces. This on Instagram and ooh, there's that subway again. Instagram and Facebook, I belong to Ruins Freak, Ruins Porn, Ruins, people who like ruins, and this is certainly a continuation of that. I don't know how he got the models in. I assume it was TurboCAD or something like that. Lighting is pretty cool. This is where we're going. We're making it and going there for our final. So resonance. You walk into the, here's a film I took years ago. I think it was 2004. For students inside one of my favorite building in all the world, the Pantheon in Rome. It's a place of worship of all gods, implying all aspects of the personality, all getting away from the monotheistic sort of straitjacketing of later Judeo-Christian Islamic traditions, and talking about one place for all gods. And what does it describe? It describes a void. It describes a perfect volume. This shape describes a perfect sphere inside this enclosure. So what I did is just poke around with the camera at a certain time of the day. I think it was 2 or 3. Spent an hour in it and just aligned, looking up at the oculus, which is the eye, and just marveled at its construction, its beauty, its resonance as the great sphere, the sphere of knowledge. The ancient Babylonians had an assigned city on their riverways. The ancient summer, not Babylonia, ancient summer had assigned places where it's the coalescence of complete knowledge, the meh, M-E-H. inhabiting a certain city. Uruk was the second that took this temple value. Temples and religions are often seen as a way of sussing out the free riders in society. So these religious buildings have, even though they're constructs of imaginary states, they have these functions within a setting, and often have the most devoted aspects, the most devoted sort of aesthetics and decoration to them. So that's the Pantheon. And this is a student of mine, Kevin. Again, this whole lecture is a resonance of what's out there. How do we perceive things? How do we start to feel things? How do we re-educate ourselves, uneducate, get rid of the propaganda that society places on us, and attempt even to get a free slate, let alone a modality like space and Jungianism. We're looking for a state that would give us a blank slate, and we would understand that these things have been around for tens of thousands of years, and that we're born with these genetics, we're born with these epigenetics, the way, even our mother carried us in her womb, has epigenetic effect from trauma, substances, substance abuse, things like that. It's not really witch doctor stuff anymore at this point of how trauma, but also how beauty and aesthetics, intelligence is affected on the epigenetic level. So I contend, just like I said, anyone can draw, anyone can perceive space if they open up a part of them that receives it, first of all, with that punch in the gut. But second of all, start like a detective asking questions about the space. Kevin, student, we're teaching Rome in January, had been, one of the assignment is to download this golden section Fibonacci rule of thirds filter on a camera, on a cell phone. Then to go on our field trips, this I think is in Florence, and reapply that. I like the way Kevin just didn't line everything up with right angles and perfect parallels, but it had an angle to it, which was clever. But let's take a look at this. So the golden section, as we said, emerging from the great centers in China, India, Egypt, Sumer, Babylonia, the Assyrians, the Hittites, the early Greeks, and then into kind of a spiritual articulation by Pythagoras, who is both in northern Egypt and in Sicily. So these are schools of thought behind this. So let's go back to see how Kevin positioned the golden section. Go. Just having a view of these ruins, these magnificent ruins of the Palatine, then observing the sculptures and seeing where this Fibonacci recursive angle is applied everywhere. So this is part of an awakening to understand these ancient codes reworked. You're not going to get it at the strip malls in Long Island, but it would be interesting if you could. I mean, just as the spatial artist, esoteric, was looking for the ruins in, there's Botticelli in Florence, more Florentine stuff, proportioned, the rape of the Sabine women, in the academia where Michelangelo is. So this is a start at reapplying what was thousands of years old, maybe 5,000-6,000 years old, in basically the interconnected cities and their rivers, from the Yellow River in China through the Harappan culture of Pakistan, Tigris, Euphrates in Babylonia, the Nile certainly, and then edging just a little bit further west in Greece and Sicily, Cyprus, and so forth. So let's talk about resonance, how you prime yourself, how you prep yourself, especially in an era where we're so quick to destroy, dismantle whole systems, and not assuming that these things are propaganda when they're not. They're just a proposal that could be absorbed, listened to. We're in a society that does not listen too well anymore. We're in a society that employs ad hominem arguments to the man. Means literally, which means instead of dealing with a dialogue about balanced arguments, we go to the person itself to establish the veracity of the argument, which is a fallacious argument. But what happens when we try to reapply this? This is a study in Montreal that was looking kind of on sacred spaces in the North American continent. And now we assume that the Westerners, Anglos, French, Spanish people, had no sort of applying a spiritual sacredness to their spaces, and we assume that Native Americans were the people that were already applying their spaces. This is kind of begs the question, like, sacred to whom? If I started this lecture saying all religions a theory, not a propaganda, a theory that says that most religions started, there's little gods and big gods. The little gods inhabited, kind of like Shinto, kind of like these little deities that inhabit places, are gods that dwell amongst us. The river god, the ocean god, the forest gods. The big gods, and that early religion was a form to make sure on an urban scale everyone was kind of doing their jobs, harvesting crops, keeping in cycles of harvesting. The bigger gods came up when families, friends, intimates necessarily expanded up to strangers, foreigners, foreign traders, and so forth. So the big gods made their entrances. What kind of total system could we have to describe what type of ethic we could conduct ourselves in with each other, with the earth, and so forth? This idea goes from language, philosophical foundation, archetypes, phenomenology, a troubled term, emotion, memory, ritual myth, concept of design, sacred place design. And how do you design a sacred place if your agenda is secular, in a modernist secular world? All about design. Here we go. Of things, places, or persons in their office set apart. The sacred. These are definitions. The spiritual is of, pertaining to, affecting, or concerning the spirit or higher moral qualities. It could be this thing between little gods and big gods. Reverence is what we need more of. The reverence of curiosity, the reverence of strange things, the reverence of just showing you spatial I/O. What is this? It's social VR. Instead of having a glib opinion of it, we could say, let's give it a try. Let's work it out. Place, an open space in a city, a square, a marketplace, a material place, a proportion of space actually occupied by a person or thing. Secular, pertaining to the world, belonging to the world. Profane, not pertaining or devoted to what is sacred or biblical. The profane world. Clearly we think of our businesses. What do you want to be when you grow up? As a profane sort of thing, and now the sacred is attached to that. Let's go further. This is the interesting part I wanted to get to. The cave, the mountain, the river, the tree, the temple, the path, the garden grove, the stone arrangement. And there's one more. Let's deal with them in the archetype, the original pattern or model from which copies are made, a prototype, an assumed ideal pattern of the fundamental structure of each great division of organized beings. So the cave is a pattern of, one cave is pattern on the idea of all caves. That's language and semiotics, but it's also this archetypal pattern. In the psychology of C.G. Jung, a pervasive idea, image, or symbol that forms part of the collective unconscious. For that use of the term literary criticism. So archetype, the cave becomes an archetype for knowledge. The mountain becomes an archetype for ascendancy. The river, more than just implying drainage of flowing water, implies some sort of being. I mentioned before that the Maori had for 200 years lobbied to give their landscapes, rivers, mountains, human designates, so they could not be bought or sold like humans because slavery is illegal. So they had fought to treat their archetypal landscape as entities, as beings, like human beings. The tree. Now we get into the person-made, man-made, the temple. What did that mean? What did the architectural reference of this collective religion, which does imply self and others? The foreigner, the other, might live outside that given religion. The path, the garden grove, the stone arrangement, all these things are archetypal. The cave includes outdoor, indoor space associated with paths, earth, and sense of enclosure. The mountain associated with paths, skies, and openness. Landscape feature associated with water, earth, and sky, and time. The tree associated with life, water, earth, time, and grandeur. The temple includes an indoor and outdoor space associated with earth, sky, and grandeur. The path associated with earth, sky, and time. The garden can include an indoor-outdoor space, large stone collection. The solar alignment associated with sky, time, and grandeur. The womb, a built feature, can include labor, outdoor space associated with sense of enclosure and earth. Monument can include indoor, outdoor space, earth, sky, and grandeur. The clearing, a sense of enclosure, paths, earth, and sky. These are the resonant forms. These are the forms we want to put back into our spatial I/O setup. Um, uh, these are kind of a learning device, an archetype, tropes that are supposed to resonate on a subconscious level, a learned level. So a couple of these people talking about ritual plus myth. Kevin Lynch's Theory of Good City Form is a book I've always liked in trying to describe, kind of re-imply these grammars throughout cities that might be large in confusion. One was Boston, one was Jersey City, and the other one I think was LA that he studied. And he reapplied the spatial sense in more sort of open ecumenical way. Two things, genus, is the place with reference to the body associated, connected with, and axis mundi, the axis of the earth. Where is this? So the genus had an implied deity there in olden times, and the axis mundi has that of a giant tree, a mountain, a bridge, a ladder, provides a center to the cosmos by connecting all three realms, that of underworld, that of human beings, and that of gods. So axis mundi is that place that has that connection. So it does not matter if you're a secular atheist thinker who would just entertain these basic ideas about use in the city. This is Christian Norberg Schultz, who talks about the spiritual dimensions of a landscape, sacred place and design. So all of this is going on in order to design a park, St. Anne's Park, in context, with this beautiful view of Montreal in 1892, busy city. Let's go onward. So I will pack this in for you. This is SketchUp, and there are 7 primary archetypes of the psyche and civilization. These are, again, archetypes to be used and abused and taken and moved and all this other good stuff. And I planted a bunch of watercolors in that space. But I've also gone to SketchUp Warehouse and gotten these things. The sensitive chaos, the world of Great Spirit, could be the world of the maze. The maze is very archetypal. If you've ever been to the maze in Chartres, the beautiful little town outside of Paris, Chartres Cathedral has this wonderful pagan maze right at the nave of the cathedral. Mysterious, wonderful, talk about hitting someone in the gut with this, and you're supposed to cleanse yourself by this walking in the maze, which has obviously a pre-Christian dimension to it. The Great Round, the world of the goddess, and I have chosen a couple items. The Great Round as the seating area, as an amphitheater, but also it's stretching it because the Great Tower is also, the ziggurat is also phallic, represents the masculine, but the roundness is part of the feminine also. So we do have these archetypal things worked out, the 4 quarters. The Great Round is the world of the goddess. The 4 quarters, the world of the hero, meaning each area maintains a task, a fecundity, a challenge to it. The pyramid is the world of the god king, the emperor on earth, the pharaoh, all of this stuff. The radiant axes look like the four quarters, but they're world of the emperor. They radiate outward from the emperor. If you've ever been to the Forbidden City in Beijing, I have a couple times, but one memorable time was in the snow with the white snow falling around the red walls. I'll try and dig up those photographs. Absolutely stunning. The bamboo plants were still the green element in this snowy winterscape. And so the world at the center, the spiritual center of this Forbidden City, which is working out of 9 squares. So there was, even in city planning, the houses were reflected in 9 squares, moved to the city, and then moved to the temple, that each had their position in it, which moves us on to the grid, the world of the technocrat, the world of someone trying to do something with agriculture, with a city, like in the spatial thing, with a VR space resembling a social VR space made by an artist in Brooklyn. What kind of resonances are they trying to pluck in our system? The network, back up. The network is world of the infonaut, like the Argonauts of the Jason myth, and the tasked, like the tasks of Hercules, which I think he was part of the Jason crew too. Ulysses, tasked with coming home. These elements, these spatial elements, have a resonant within these old pieces. 2 years ago we did Epic of Gilgamesh for our final in social VR. We tried to find the future perfect, the history of the past, the future of the past expressed in social VR, but now of older sort of architectural settings. So what did I get here? I got a pyramid. I dug up a bunch of just structure type things for the grid. For the network, I dug up this awning. This implied that there's an umbrella overhead, but there's dealings on that level. So these are the resonances in our SketchUp that we should go back to TurboCAD, TurboCAD, and get free elements to bring into these spaces, and look at other free sources to which we can make these things up. Sacred geometries, as I mentioned, Pythagoras maybe he was a committee, maybe it was one man. It later became a priest who developed this kind of logical religion out of that. A couple of years ago, 4, 5, 6 years ago, we created a Jungian archetype generator with a chance element using max MSP. Even in our, won't get into this now, but even in our dealing as a hero, something such as work, will it be there? Will it be meaningful? Will we be adequately paid? Will this be boring? Will it be exciting? Will it impact the rest of the world? Will it deal with just pure money, as in finance? Is it a means to an end? Will we live to work or work to live? All these questions resonate. We'll get onto that. This is a particular conversation about backcasting. A few years ago, I developed a Jungian Christian Norberg Schultz type interface for cities to place in the cities so we could understand it. This is a trip to Pompeii, one of my absolute favorite places on earth. I hope you get to go there. Again, this is for designers, for people who are studying urban settings to understand what's a blank slate. Am I coming to this as a blank slate? Am I a mere Philistine shutting down ideas? Am I able to perceive what is potential in this space, what is spiritual, what is meaningful in this space? Or have I been walking through my early life as a zombie? Am I incapable of this? Things such as parallel with cuisine. I respect people who are able to do it. I respect the finesse. I don't know if I was tuned that way or could be, but this again is parallel to my concept of opening yourself up for these discussions. When I was teaching kind of a architecture and game design thing in Singapore, we often use these archetypal elements. We saw these things in various movies, such as Dune recently, Blade Runner again. All of these setting items have a great kind of Jungian appeal, lack of a better word, that are, often movies nowadays are seduced by their own sense of CG, setting, and so forth. And the text misses the boat. Certainly with the latest Dune, I understand that. I've never read the books, but they were faithfully trying to follow the books and failed in filmic form. What else? Yes, cinema and games take over that dimension. A kind of a favorite game, even though I'm not a gamer, I do like to see these resonances, was LA Noire, where you had returning soldiers with PTSD becoming undercover cops and detectives. You had disaffected Americans and foreigners becoming communists during the Red Scare in LA in the 50s. And in general, you had a mythic sense of film noir, which is again a favorite Jungian archetypal landscape, of a landscape of decrepitude, of shattered expectations, of immensely beautiful things within it, such as the heroines and the femme fatales are the beauty in it, the archetypal personalities. We're talking about space and design, but there's aspects of the character in person. Two American women, mother and her daughter, forged the Myers-Briggs test. I don't know if you took it or they stopped having it when you're in school, which would analyze your personality type and actually offer some sort of aspect of what you would actually be good at. Most people schmooze through life and end up finding that or staying immensely unhappy and stuff like that. Boo-hoo. But this is part, if you can see the part of this as a quest for individuation, Jung's final goal. Big criticism of Jung, certainly of Freud, is that they've archetyped or straitjacketed gender, less so racial roles, but if you weren't a white European male, this had very little to do with you. I beg to differ. This is a modality, it's not a science. It's interesting in order to navigate through. This is certainly after and now that we're examining on the edge of something as important as CRISPR, biological engineering, we're understanding or trying to understand what epigenetics will be. And we realized that Jung was kind of fleshing out a general idea of epigenetics. Epigenetics is the science. Jung has more or less a speculative grasp over psychology. And that's what makes the late 19th century, early 20th fun for the social sciences, the humanities, massive paradigm shifts we talked about. But the idea that Wittgenstein and Russell came along and said philosophy is merely the following from Kant, to philosophize is to sin, because it's merely rearranging, understanding language patterns, and we can only exist on this thin crust of knowledge. We can't get into the nominal world, even though we might feel it's there. That could be a delusion. A.J. Ayer worked that out in his slender book, Language, Truth, and Logic, where he said everything that we assume to be value and meaning is actually a misapplication of language. That if we go back and correct ourselves in terms of predicate calculus, we can start to unpack these unnecessary and embarrassing forms of languages. A.J. Ayer sort of backtracked from that at one point. Interesting individual. He was at a party. He wrote this in the 20s, 30s, and in the 80s he found himself at a party with Mike Tyson, and he went up against, there was an altercation, and he went up against Mike Tyson at this party in New York. A very, very fun anecdote of A.J. Ayer. The one we can blame for this pervasive positivism, saying that anything out here has no meaning, it is just a relations of parts expressed in languages. We will start to plug in an idea of, we dealt with Lear and Earl. We will start to plug in ideas of where we're going with just these archetypal plots. So if space has its archetypes, certainly time does too, and certainly personalities do. That's why the Myers-Briggs test was given to, working class public school people to say what's the best fit. We don't want to put a square peg in a round hole. This counters some of the Taylorism, which is engineering the person solely for the job. It didn't care if it put square pegs in round holes. And kind of the patrician paternalism of Henry Ford. Hey, you can own what you work on. Let's talk about non-alienation from the products of your labor, but there's going to be rigid sort of algorithms on how to build industrial America, which has since collapsed. We see it in archetypal characters forms like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, people who were changing whole economies by, was it a vision, or is it just kind of responsiveness out of them, a kind of a quest where they exist on this Jungian scale is interesting. understanding architecture through drawing, we'll get around to that. Here's the Johari square, which is incredibly interesting. First quadrant, we'll get into this deeper in further lectures. A little too complicated to express as we're running out of time here. Wiki House is mythic. This is a group that established methods of putting together houses from CNC, no nails, no things like that, designed, left online, could be CNC cut from large CNC cutters on 3/4 inch ply. Incredibly interesting concept. One of our tasks, one that has absorbed me for most of my life, is a big mystery. We can point our finger at the culprits in neoliberal capitalism. Is why, with this incredible brain power, this incredible capacity for humans to change, for their creativity, for their energy, why can't we have affordable housing? What is so difficult in that? And it's a number of features, which are mythic and Jungian too. This notion of entitlement. You're born, you're put here on earth because your parents made love one night, you came by 9 months later. You're entitled as a human being for some things. This is relative. It's not, they try to make this absolute around the world. They still have problems with this. In the West, because of Bismarck, we have these notions of a state that tweaks the economics of the system. And in this, we have things such as entitlements, food, clothing, shelter, hospitalization, medical attention, the right or ability to have children if we want. Where in the mythic archetypal Jungian world do these things exist as entitlements? WikiHouse was a design service placing all these really wonderful designs, modernist designs, online free that could laser cut 3/4 inch ply, expose the wood, have this primal resonance with the DIY and the handmade stuff, and the frankly the Jungian resonance of the tiny house, and the heroic task against dragons, against other forces to overcome the forces making the banks, the finance, the jobs. We saw in the movie that jobs were probably going to go away for half the people. How will we be able to live? And what space? What personal, what real, and what mythic space will we live in? We will see you in the next lecture.